Hello and welcome back to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Mayer, and we've got an electrifying episode lined up for you today. But before we dive in, I want to remind you to check us out at themfgconnector.com, where you can find all the latest episodes, blog posts, and more. Don't forget to connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram to stay in the loop with everything happening in the world of manufacturing and culture. And while you're at it, hop over to YouTube and check out our other show, The Manufacturing Connector. If you're all about finding innovative solutions that can revolutionize your business, that's the show for you. Now, let's get into today's guest because this is a story you will not want to miss. We are thrilled to have Jason Anthoine with us, a true legend in the world of internal communication and employee engagement. With over 35 years of experience under his belt, Jason has been at the forefront of transforming workplace cultures in some of the biggest names out there. Think GE, Siemens, Coca-Cola, and so many more. He's the guy who helps companies reimagine their relationships with their blue-collar employees, bringing the courage, confidence, and clarity needed to ignite a cultural revolution. From leading global communications for energy giants to founding not one, but two successful employee engagement firms, his career has been a masterclass in turning challenges into opportunities. And if that's not enough, he's also the brain behind Connect, one of the world's largest conferences for employee communication professionals, and the creator of the groundbreaking research initiative, What Employees Want. In 2024, Jason launched Riding Shotgun, a storycast that celebrates 35 years of communication courage, accomplishments, and yes, even a few calamities. And I'm looking forward to those. He's all about the big question, what if, instead of just accepting what is. That's the kind of forward thinking mindset that drives change and makes a real impact. So buckle up, folks. We're about to take a deep dive into the world of workplace culture with a man who's been at the helm of some of the most transformative projects in the industry. Jason Anthoine is here to share his story, his insights, and maybe even a few secrets on how to create a culture that not only works, but thrives. Let's get started. Jason Anthoine, welcome to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. How are you doing today?
Wow, this is incredible. It's so good to be here, Jim. Thank you. I'm doing great. It's been a busy week, and you and I are kind of wrapping up both of our weeks together here, talking about some fun things. So this is actually the highlight of my week. So thank you for making that possible.
You're very welcome, my friend. And it is. We are wrapping up here late on a Friday, and it's just going to be a fun, relaxing conversation. So, Jason, again, thanks for being on.
Oh, yeah.
I ask all of my guests to start out by telling us their story. I want you to really start at the beginning. What sparked your passion for internal communication and employee engagement, and how did you get to where you are today?
Wow. A lot of people don't leave that much room for me to tell my whole story like that. So I'll try to compress it down to 3 to 4 minutes, maybe at the most. But it really starts back when I was a kid. So I grew up in a small town in middle Georgia called Fort Valley. And Fort Valley is kind of known for two things. One, peaches. So Georgia is known for peaches, and Fort Valley is in Peach County. So all around the county are peach orchards as far as you can see. And then the second thing we're known for is Bluebird school buses. So if you grew up riding a Bluebird school bus to school, then chances are it came from Fort Valley, among some other plants earlier on. And Bluebird is where my dad worked for 37 years. He started there when he was in high school, and he would come to the plant after school, and the president of the company told him, "You can work here, but you have to get your homework done first." So he would have to report to the president's office and do his homework and get that done before he could go out on the shop floor and actually
Wow.
do his work. And he ended up staying there for 37 years, um, you know, ending up sort of as a foreman on two different parts of the production line. And my mother was a secretary at the bank.
Wow.
And so both of them would come home from work, just like we all do, probably, and talk about how work was. And most kids are like, "Oh, that's boring. I don't want to hear about that." But for me, it was absolutely fascinating. Like, I know these people go away during the day and they're doing something, and I don't know what it is. And the more I found out, the more interesting it was. And so they just talk about their day and what worked and who was good to work with and who wasn't and why and all those kinds of things. And it just, I just absorbed it all, and it just embedded itself in me. And so I went to college and studied public relations so that I could graduate and work for companies to help them, kind of tell their stories to employees, and vice versa, help their employees be able to tell their own version of that story.
Yeah.
So I graduated from University of Georgia in Athens on a Saturday, moved to Atlanta on a Sunday, and Monday I started doing a newsletter at a bank, an employee newsletter. And here it is 35 years later, and I'm still doing employee communications. And I love it. I love it. So many people say you have to do what you're passionate about. And, this is it. This is what I'm passionate about. And it's not a job. It's just who I am at this point. I wake up every morning and everything I think of has some sort of employee communications and culture perspective to it. And I don't know how to not do that anymore at this point. So, as my old boss used to say, if you can't fix it, feature it. So I've been featuring it for 35 years.
I love that. If you can't fix it, feature it. That could be the title of this episode. Jason, after you worked at the bank, where did that go? How did you get into the agency life? How did you get to working with some of those big brands that you worked with?
Yeah, so I spent probably the first, I would say, maybe half of my career on the corporate side. First job was at a bank, then the next one was a bank software company. And then a small agency where my main client was Southwire, which is a manufacturing company in West Georgia that makes wire and cable globally. And then I ended up working for Southwire. And that really felt good. I'm back in a manufacturing environment. These people out here are making stuff, they're not just moving numbers around on a spreadsheet, things like that. So I spent about half my career sort of on that corporate side. And then, as is common in the communications industry, a bunch of other years on the agency side. My own agency, the first one, I did that for 10 years, and it was an internal comms agency. And the weird thing about it was about 90% of the internal comms that we did was benefits communications. So helping employees understand what their benefits are and how to enroll in them, and how to value them based on how much the company is investing as part of their total comp package. And I will tell you, after having written, I don't know, thousands of enrollment guides, there's about 9 different ways that you can explain how to go to the dentist, but there ain't 10. There's just a limit to certain kinds of creativity on certain types of topics like that. So
sure.
So then I worked with a couple of other what I call intergalactic PR firms, big, large global firms doing, again, internal comms for them and their clients. And that's where I ran into companies like Coca-Cola, Crown Plaza Hotels, folks like that who have distributed workforces who are always difficult to reach, but they're the most important ones to reach to me, because everybody in the office tower is making all the promises, but it's those people who have to keep them. Yeah. So they need to know everything about what's going on so that they can keep those promises like that. So, and then that brought me back through GE and through Siemens and through Newell Brands, and then back over here on the consulting side now. So, but my passion is distributed employees, particularly blue collar employees in manufacturing, and what can we do to make things better for them, to acknowledge the huge contribution that they're making, and to make sure that, if all of that stuff matters at work, then what can we do to make work matter more?
I love that last sentence. That was a mic drop moment, folks. That's been a great episode, and
We'll
this
see
was
y'all later. It's Miller time for me and Jim now.
That was great. That was phenomenal.
So I love it. I
Jason,
just love it. Yeah.
yeah. So you have worked with some massive brands, right? And so I'm wondering, what are some of the cultural challenge that you faced and saw within those brands, and how did you help drive the change needed to make that change within
Yeah.
such massive organizations that are distributed?
Oh, that is such a huge, huge, huge challenge. And everybody from outside of an organization looks and goes, "Oh, look how big GE is, or Siemens, and it's just whatever challenges you have, wherever it is you are right now in your own organization, they just are monstrous once you get to that kind of scale. And so most people think, oh, well, certainly you've got more resources and more teams and, more budget and all those things. Well, not necessarily. I mean, now you have a scale issue, and, if you're in a smaller organization, you can reach 300 people and, in a day. You might have to reach 300,000 people in multiple languages in 3 days. So it just makes it a little bit more complex. And so, as many advantages as people think that these large global organizations have, the one thing that they don't have is the ability for communications and leadership to be really, really personal. And I think small firms and mid-sized firms, that is a huge advantage, because I know these 10 people that are working right out here. I know them by name.
Yeah.
I see them at dinner on Sunday night, and that's different. And so the scale creates a lot of complexity. And what happens is that usually there's an over reliance on these high tech platforms, apps and email and intranets and digital signage and all that kind of stuff, which is great. We need all that stuff. But what they have to do is to continue to deliver a high touch experience. And that's the hardest part to do. Not because you can't, but a lot of times because, it's too hard. We're not even really going to try. It matters if you try. It certainly matters on the other end.
So, Jason, how has your approach, I mean, 35 years, that's a storied career in itself, but how has your approach to employee engagement, culture, and internal comms changed over the span of that career? Because 35 years ago, employee engagement, company culture, I mean, they weren't talked about.
No.
They existed,
they weren't.
They just weren't talked about.
That's exactly right. They weren't a thing. Somebody finally put a label on it, mostly so they could sell it as a service, which is fine. I get it. People have to make a living. That's when you put a name on it, so that, people will buy it if they think it's a thing.
Yep.
So, but yeah, you're right. Like employee engagement and culture and all those things have always existed, since humans, got together, however many millions of years ago that was. And then all that kind of transferred into the workplace. But I think the one thing, despite all those changes and technology and speed and complexity and globalness and all those things, what hasn't changed is that the simplest parts are still simple, which is the whole point of having a culture and worrying about employee engagement is because you're building relationships with people. You can bring AI in, you can bring, all the greatest technology on the assembly line with robots and everything else. But at the end of the day, people are still running these things. People are still working there, and everything that we're trying to do to build culture and engagement and everything else that's important is truly just human connection. So, so I try to stay really focused and grounded around that. And some people now like to call that employee experience, but it's also a fancy term that's marketable. But truly, at the end of the day, what it means is that there are humans working here, and we need to acknowledge that and appreciate that and do what we can to build and strengthen those relationships so that we're all getting what we want out of this workplace. Otherwise, why are we even doing this?
Your work often centers around that connection between leadership and their blue collar employees, right? And I attribute that a lot to you watching Dad walk out of the Bluebird
Yeah.
plant, right?
Yeah.
So why do you believe that focus is so crucial, so critical to making manufacturing a robust industry to work in? And can
Mhm.
it help us solve that skills gap that exists within manufacturing?
Yeah. That's a really great question. And I don't know. I just think, like I said earlier, like at the end of the day, at the bus plant, out rolls a school bus. Like that's a work of art. That's a craft. That's a skill. Those are things that not everybody either can do, or even if they could do really well enough to roll a school bus off an assembly line every 13, 14 seconds or whatever the number is.
Right.
So, I mean, that is a highly skilled craft that these people are doing. Um, just think everything around you, human hands have touched them. You look around your room right now, every single thing in there, human hands have touched and made. That's what these people do all day long. So what can we do to make sure that they understand what we're trying to do in the marketplace and who the customers are and what their expectations are? We bring that back inside the organization so that the people doing the work have that full understanding, and then they each know what their piece of that is, so that the sum of the parts is greater than the whole. And each part is just as valuable as any other part. And for people to be really good at that, they've got to have a coach. They've got to have somebody who's got their back. They've got to feel like there's a scoreboard and it gets updated often enough that I know I need to go faster or slower or better or pull back here. All those things are incredibly important. And the best way to deliver that, despite all these communications channels and digital doodahs and everything else, the best way to deliver that is face to face, human to human. And it doesn't get any tighter than, right there where the work is happening with the leaders who are responsible for making sure that those people have what they need to make that work happen. And so I just always go back to that, which is what can we do to build and strengthen those relationships? And the best way to do that is face to face. And then everything else is a substitute for that. Some of those substitutes are better than others, but all of that is a substitute for face to face.
Talk to us a little bit about Cohesion and Audacity and the two employee engagement firms, because that's what they are, right? Employee engagement firms.
Yeah, employee engagement, employee experience, culture change, internal comms. In our industry, we really suffer from branding because we don't know what to call ourselves, and nobody knows what we are doing anyway, no matter which term that we use. They understand marketing, they understand public relations, they understand, but like we say internal comms, people are like, what is that? I'm not sure what that is. So, it doesn't matter what you call it. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do is just, build better workplaces and the people who work in them. And so for Cohesion, the idea there was because I was doing a ton of benefits communication stuff and I was working directly for companies, and it was always whatever the providers gave us, that were all that's enrollment materials and things like that, and they were all written by actuaries and lawyers, and nobody can understand any of that stuff, and we're just handing it off. Hey, I know this is a big decision for you. Just read through this. And if you have any questions, here's a 1-800 number you can call. Well, that's not helpful, And in most cases, it's the spouse making the benefits decision anyway. So now you're one or, at least one person removed from fully understanding things. And that makes it even more complicated. So the whole idea behind that firm was how can we make benefits communications feel more like truly real conversations that humans actually have using words that people actually use that can still pass the actuary and lawyer test. And so that's what we did. This was way before digital, we printed everything and mailed everything. This was way before any of that stuff. So just tons and tons of stuff in an effort to make sure that employees understand this very important, component of their total comp, and ran that thing for a while. And then the whole idea for Audacity kind of came out of what I did after that, which was kind of with the intergalactic PR firms and with GE and a couple of other larger firms, which was, all right, now the market has shifted. Now we have all these digital tools. People don't know how to use them. They've bought them. They still don't know how to write. Employees don't have access to them. I'm not going to go into my break room and get on a kiosk. I'm on break. It's the height of ridiculousness to expect anybody to just go in there and do that. So what can we do to untangle all that and still stay true to, building these relationships and providing the types of communications and experience that employees need while they're at work. And so that was the whole idea behind Audacity as well.
So how did that, and well, maybe not how did, but did those spur the creation of Connect?
Definitely. And the reason that here is the number one reason why that conference kind of came about. When I worked at one of those intergalactic PR firms, I was responsible for the internal communications practice. They're broken up into practices like a law firm is. So I did the internal practice, somebody did the consumer practice, somebody did the crisis practice. And so I was hiring a bunch of people to come in and work in the internal comms practice. And I was like, okay, these people need some training. This place doesn't have that. So where can I send them? So I started looking for conferences and events and anything where people could go and learn. And there wasn't anything. There truly wasn't anything. So I was like, well, heck, let's just make one. So it was me and the team, and we said, all right, what kind of conference would we want to go to? Let's build that. So we just built this little conference in 2011, and we sent out the invitation and say, hey, here's what it is, and here's who's going to be speaking. We had some people from GE there. We had the new Volkswagen plant in Chattanooga there. We had, different types of industries and different things that these communications people could talk about. And we were like, I don't know how many people are going to sign up for this thing. 20, maybe us and 10 other people. We had about 200 people that first time.
Wow.
And it was amazing. Absolutely. The team that put it together, they were just so excited about it. And it went really well. So well that we partnered with the Public Relations Society of America, which is a big trade organization in our industry. And they, came on board to kind of co-sponsor it and market it for us. And the agency that I was working with at the time, over time, decided, we're not going to do that anymore. And then PRSA took it over, and then it became the largest internal comms conference on the planet. They would normally get 400 or 500 people, registering and attending this event. And I attended later, much later when it was bigger like that. And I was like, I just remember sitting in my office at like 7:30 at night with 2 or 3 people around us coming up with what we think the first one ought to be. And now look what's happened to it. So it was very, very gratifying to see that.
Wow. And so what's the impact been of that? And is it still going on?
It's still going on. PRSA does it. They have it in May of every year. In fact, this year, a couple of months ago, is in Atlanta. So that's always a chance for me to get together with a bunch of people in the industry that I know and hear all these great presentations from these up and coming internal comms folks who are doing cool and unique things and, in all kinds of industries. And of course, I flock to the ones with distributed employees and particularly manufacturing. So that's where you can always find me, but it's still going strong. And, the next generation is coming up with a whole lot of information and knowledge and training that a lot of us who came along earlier just didn't have. We just kind of had to figure it out on our own.
I'm going to have to see if I can't make it to next year's. That sounds like a place that I would feel very at home in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the best part is that they do have a lot of speakers, not just internal comms people and the regular folks you would imagine that would be there, but they want to hear from others. Like if you are literally working in a manufacturing plant and you're responsible for communications as a frontline supervisor, we want to hear from you. We want you to be there because we don't hardly ever get that kind of, this person's out there. They're really doing it. Like we hear from the comms people, but we don't hear from the operations people nearly as much as we should. So yeah, I would encourage you or anybody listening, if that's of interest to you, then get in touch with me and I'll put you in touch with them and we can make that happen because they would love it.
All right, I'm going to make a call to action right here, Jason. Anybody who wants to be part of a panel at Connect, let's pitch it to them, a manufacturing communication panel. And Jason can be our guy to help us try and get in there. Let's make it happen.
That's right. And there's, about, I don't know, half a dozen more similar to that, not quite as large, but some of them are a little more specialized. Same thing. They're always looking for folks like
Wow.
that. So, if you got one great idea, we can go sell it 12 different places and we'll see who buys. Maybe they all do.
Let's sold
Yeah,
and
right.
sold.
Exactly.
So after all of this, Jason, in 2020, interesting year, but you launched this global research effort called What Employees Want.
Yeah.
Do I have that timeline correct
That's
there?
exactly right. That's exactly right. In fact, we had a launch event associated with that. So we launched there's a digital survey component of that anybody can take as long as you work somewhere, which is most everybody on the planet. We don't have any lottery winners responding to this survey because they don't have to work anymore. But everybody, for the rest of us, everybody's welcome to take it. And so we launched it in, I guess, maybe the summer of 19. So we had some results. And so we had a sort of a launch event in late January of 20 in Atlanta. And the idea was most conferences, like ones we just discussed, are comms people standing up there talking about what they're doing and what the results are and all those kinds of things, which is great. We need that.
Mm-hmm.
But what we also need is to hear directly from the employees themselves. So this conference was every single presentation will be a communications person or an HR person or an operations person asking a panel of employees who work somewhere what they want. Because all of these other conferences talk about what we want, what we like to do, what we have done, what we think works. None of them are about, hey, why don't we ask the people we're sending all this stuff to if they want any of that stuff? And that was what the whole event was panel after workshop after discussion about hearing directly from employees who work at all kinds of places all around Atlanta. It was in Atlanta, telling us what they do and do not want. And it paired up nicely with the research that we were doing online as well. And it was a great event. And it was, I think, the last internal comms event before pandemic, the shutdown and all that. So it was 2 years later before anybody else got together. So,
wow.
But it was so eye-opening. It was eye-opening to hear all of this stuff directly from employees. So you can imagine we were very selective about, all right, we want to have a mix of demographics, a mix of roles, a mix of industries, a mix of big and little and, high tech and low tech. So we just had them all up there, all mixed together. And it was interesting because there's a lot of assumptions that, particularly from corporate communications, but also because leaders kind of force us to think this way. All right, well, we're going to put together an intranet and everybody's going to go there and everybody's going to like it. And then we're also going to send out a bunch of emails all day long, and they're going to put mostly the same stuff on digital signage so that nobody can escape all of this propaganda that we're sending out. We're going to hit them everywhere we can possibly hit them.
Yep.
And so there were some employees on stage who said, yes, more of that. I can't get enough. I like it. That's how I live my personal life. I have all these social channels that I'm on. I'm doing all this stuff and I want it to be like that at work. Great. Young and old said that. Okay. Young and old also said, please stop. Really, just stop. Like, I know what I need to know to get my job done. And if there's anything else that I might possibly need to know, I'll go ask one of these people who is looking at all this stuff, and then they can tell me. I don't have time for this because I'm trying to get actual work done. And it was just fascinating to hear all these different takes on what we as communications and HR people think is important and what works and what doesn't work. That from our own perspective versus what these folks who are receiving all this stuff are saying about it. And it was just great to hear, yes, this, no, never that. What I would really prefer are more conversations with leaders. What I would really like is for somebody to send me something at my house that doesn't say dear employee, because, I've worked there 18 years. You don't know my name yet. So, it was just absolutely fascinating. And we just got a lot of really good comments, not just from the attendees, but from the employees themselves. They're like, I've been working in this place forever. And nobody's ever asked me my opinion about what I want there. Now here I am on stage getting to tell all you people this will help change things. And so it was just, it was really good. Yeah.
So where can companies use this as a resource now to help them change their company culture? I mean, is there a place that they can go to find some of these findings?
Yes.
To help based on the industry, how do they bucket the information?
So the survey, the digital survey itself is live all the time, and anybody who wants to go and take it can take it. We'll put the link for you in the show notes and some of the other things, because it tweaks every now and then depending on what's going on in the digital world. But then also we pull sort of a executive overview report once a quarter to say, all right, here's what it was last quarter. Here's what it is this quarter. Here's what we think might be happening. And then, you can sort of see over time, all right, in 20, everything was different. In 21, it was totally different. Now here it is, the middle of 24, or what's different and what is still the same. So we compile those kinds of things. And then we also, as a service that we offer is, all right, we come into your organization and then we're like, here are all the survey results that we've gotten from that effort. We can ask your employees the same thing, same questions, and then now you will have your own version of the same thing. So you can see, here's what the world thinks and here's what we think. And what are the differences there? And so that's always a great exercise to kind of map that each organization like that, because again, nobody ever asks their employees what they want. And this is a great way to just kind of find that out instead of just blindly putting together a bunch of comms materials and budget and resources that doesn't match exactly what it is that's needed out there.
Absolutely. I love that. So let's fast forward a bit. Riding shotgun. Tell us about this adventure of yours. A story cast celebrating 35 years of communication courage. What inspired you to create this, and what can listeners expect when they tune in?
Well, there's two secrets behind why I started it. One, when I was in high school, I was a DJ on the radio for a top 40 radio station, and that by far has been my favorite job ever. So I started this podcast so I could pretend I was a DJ again. I get to do my own show and nobody can tell me anything. Woohoo! Finally,
I love it.
Yeah, and so that's the sort of the first secret. The second secret is everybody's like, "Well, you should write a book." I'm too lazy to write a book. That feels like hard work. I don't have the discipline to do that. But what I can do is turn on the mic and tell some stories for 3, 5, 6 minutes, and then over time, I can press the AI button and then it will print me a book based on all of those episodes. And so those are kind of the two secrets behind why I wanted to start it. But the reality is that I've got 35 years of this kind of stuff just rattling around in my head, and I got to get it out there, and so that other people can learn from it, learn what to do and also learn what not to do based on something that I did that they're like, that's a boneheaded thing. I'm not going to do that at all. But the idea was just, what can we do to just keep telling stories about people who work and why that matters and how to reach them and the lessons learned by doing all of that. There's a lot of podcasts out there. That's why I refused. I was like, the world doesn't need another podcast. I'll just call it a story cast.
I love it. I really do. I love that
yours
idea.
is great. There's a bunch of them out there that are great, but there's also about 2 billion of them that are not. And so the world does not need another podcast. And I was like, if I say I'm doing this, people are going to be like, oh, welcome to the party. You're late. This is like a 10-year-old idea. So I said, okay, it's a story cast. What about that? But really, it's just no more than 5, 6 minutes. And it's literally me turning on the mic and telling a story based on something that actually happened. And here's the lesson from it. And that's it. Wow. You're in, you're out, you're on with your day. It's not a big commitment of time. I don't have guests. Not that I don't appreciate being a guest, but again, I'm lazy. I don't want to do all the legwork, Jim, that you have to do to make this so incredible. I just want to turn on the mic and talk and turn it off and then go mow the grass.
Yeah. I love it. And where can listeners find it?
So you can go to my main website, which is jasonanthoine.com. There's a link off there. And then, of course, it's available on all the regular podcast platforms,
Okay.
none of whom would change their name to Storycast platforms, even though I asked them. So it's on podcast platforms.
I think that's your Shark Tank idea right there, Jason.
Maybe.
A Storycast platform.
Maybe. But yeah, it's just a fun way for me to tell some stories, and I end up doing that anyway, whether people ask for it or not. So I might as well just record them.
Yeah. Well, and so let's change gears into that philosophy of yours.
Yeah.
The what if is greater than what is mindset, and it's really shaped your career. You brought it up in our initial conversation, and it's part of the way you approach challenges. So am I correct in that estimation?
Absolutely, absolutely. And we've all heard the root of sort of why I say that, like I say that, and the root of it is when people say, "Oh, well, that's just how we've always done it around here." That is the very definition of what is. I get it. You could just feel shackled by all of that stuff. And so the idea is, all right, we all have to deal with what is, but somebody has to look up and say, well, we've been doing it this way forever. What if we tried something different? What if we looked at this different? What if we looked at a totally other industry for what they are doing and see what we can learn over there and bring back over here that could make some of these changes? And then we don't feel so hamstrung by the what is. All that what is invented by all of us over the years, and then we end up being beholden to it. We're not beholden to it. We created it. We can recreate something else. And so that's the what if part of that, which is it doesn't have to be that way. You built it. You can also totally reimagine something else. That's what the what if is.
Yeah. I love that, because to me, that's the way it's always been done. Saying is, it's so
to
common.
me, that's the admission of the defeated.
Yeah.
I have tried for years to get this thing to change, and nobody will do it. And you know what? I give up.
Yep.
That's the admission of the defeated. And that's why, change is hard, innovation's hard, all these things that companies hold dear, and they don't know why they don't catch fire like they're supposed to. Well, it's because for the last 15 years, we've been beating people to death if they had a new idea,
Exactly.
We're discouraging people from doing that. Or if we do allow it, it's like with 83 toll gates and a bunch of hurdles that they've got to jump over just to get a tenth of it approved. That is not how to be innovative. That is not how to be agile. That is not how to be any of the things that we all want to be. And we all have the ability to change it, because we put it in place. We can also take it out.
Yep. And change is generally welcome when employees, I'm talking specifically about the world of work, when they're invited to the table. They love change if they're invited to the table and they get to have a voice in what that change looks like. It's when somebody in that proverbial glass tower forces, and it's surface level. It's not actual fundamentally addressing the problems that exist. That's a change people hate. That's a change people resist. But when it's something that they get to help right, and they get to see it at its root, changing the fundamentals of the landscape of wherever they work, they love change. They invite change. That's what I've found. Have you found similar things in your time?
Totally true. Totally 100,000% true. And the way you explained it really well. The way I like to think of it as well is that it only feels like change for employees if it's happening to them. But if it's happening by and for and through them, man, that's when they're on board. That's when they're excited. Yeah. My dad wasn't a learned guy. He barely got out of high school. But he had this knack of like finding these little sayings, and he'd cut them out of magazines and newspapers, and he'd leave them and tape them to my bathroom mirror. And he had a bunch of them at his little workstation at work. And there was one I remember in particular, and it was something that Henry Ford said. who better to tell you how to do the job better than the guy doing the job?
Mm,
You know?
yeah.
And that's exactly where all change should start. Not with McKinsey, not with a conference room where they've got a catered lunch of sandwiches and salads and white wine. But it needs to start with the people that are doing the work. They're the ones who can tell you how to do it better because they're the ones that are hamstrung with doing it the way that they have to do it right now. So if you want
Yeah.
change initiatives to really take hold and make a huge difference there, you got to involve the people who have to do the changing. And who
Yeah.
better to tell you what to change than those people who've been dying for it to change?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are some common threads that you've seen when it comes to cultural employee engagement transformations and in the various sizes and sectors and industries that you've worked in?
Mm-hmm.
There's bound to be some common threads that exist in those different organizations.
Yeah.
What are some of those?
The first one to me is that everything is local. Every single
Mm.
thing is local. And so let's break that down. What does local mean? For like a big company like Siemens, local is this planet. They are on this world. All right, now let's break that down. All right, by region. All right, further. All right, by country. Okay, by state. Okay, by city. Okay, by state. I mean by plant. Okay, is that local enough? No. Like there's all other levels of local inside that facility. So
Yeah.
however tiny far down you can get local, that's where things are happening. And so that's the thing that's the most common, that is also the most overlooked, is that for any employee, everything is local. Everything is local. So when we're talking about change or engagement or anything, we have to start with local first. We don't necessarily have to start communicating locally first, but we have to start from the local perspective first. We need to
Mm.
understand what's happening at that tiny little pinpoint that we define as local, and then how does that scale back up to this, this big global organization? We cannot start way big like that and then sort of push it all the way down to that pinpoint. It won't work. It doesn't work. I've seen it. It doesn't work. You have to do the reverse. And corporate doesn't like it, and all the management consulting firms don't like it either, because that's not their approach. But if you want it to be successful, then that's the way you have to do it. It has to start local and then grow global. It can't be the
Yep.
other way around.
I love
And
it.
I think the other thing too is that communication is a huge part of leadership and any kind of relationship, and it's even more important for change. And so, because everybody agrees that there needs to be change. Oh yeah, we need some changes around here. All these people over here need to change. Not me. Oh no. Oh, everything I'm doing is perfectly. So everybody thinks that there needs to be change, but nobody ever wants to change. And so the way you do that is give them a reason to do it, and then explain it 18,000 different times so that they finally listen. It's not that they don't
Yeah.
understand it, but it takes that kind of repetition for it to sink in across an entire organization. I mean, it's kind of a marketing principle. That's why you see so many ads 10, 15 times before you'll even remember, oh, you see that commercial? Yeah, it was really funny. Who was it? Well, I don't know. Well, after the 15th time, you'll remember that. That's why you see them so often. And so same
Yep.
thing, just as soon as we are sick of talking about change is when people are then finally actually listening.
Yeah.
And so when they usually under communicate the change, and they do it sort of from what I call the big C perspective. So big C, capital C communications from corporate. That's about 10% of any organization's communications, and it shouldn't be any more than that. The other 90% is what I call the little C, which is every other communication that's happening. Collaboration and small team huddles and getting together for, KPI reviews and whatever's happening locally. That's 90%. So you can't do all that change with just the big C stuff. You got to start local, and you got to do a lot of little C communications, which means you got to lean on leaders and managers and supervisors to carry a lot of that water.
Yep. Absolutely. So, as somebody who's helped drive so much internal change and culture change
Mm-hmm.
in their career,
Hmm.
what advice would you give to somebody who's just now realizing, oh, we've got a cultural problem. We've got a
Hmm.
misalignment of values.
Hmm.
We've strayed from our mission. What advice would you give to that leader who's just starting out on their
Yeah,
journey?
great. Um, I would say rely on your gut. Like if you think that we have a cultural problem or a misalignment or a values problem, if you think that, it is more than likely true because in certain roles, people like to shield people from reality. And so if you're if you're a leader, you're probably being shielded from reality in a lot of different ways. Some ways you know, some ways you don't know. But if you're starting to feel that, it's because that reality is starting to seep through this force field that other people have put around you so that they don't get in trouble for the reality that they haven't told you about.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you feel that, then it's probably true and it's taken a long time to finally get to you, which means it's probably worse than you think it is. And so the first thing you need to do is go out and ask people. Just get up from
Mm,
wherever it is you are sitting down and go out there and say, hey, I sense that things are this or that or not this or that. Is this true? And at first people are like, I'm not telling you the truth. You'll fire me. But
mm-hmm.
the more you keep asking and the more you show that you're listening, the more open they're going to be, especially if you involve them in helping come up with what the solutions are. And so that to me has always been the key, whether you're a big organization or a little organization. If you feel like you've got that misalignment, you probably do. And if you
Mm-hmm.
hire, some firm to come in and do an engagement survey, your employees are probably going to tell you what you want to hear. Sometimes they'll tell you other things, but mostly they'll tell you what they think you want to hear because they don't want to be bothered. Just let me do my job and stop asking me this stuff because you never do anything about it. Well, go out there and ask personally and then do something about it. And then the more you do that cycle, the more great information you will get as part of that cycle. And then that by itself starts to change the values, it starts to change the culture, it starts to change the misalignment because if nothing else, people see that you care and that you're trying to make a difference, and you know that the best way to do that is to involve them. Just that right there will get you so much credit.
Jason, what's the future of internal comms look like? I mean, so much has changed in your time in the industry.
Yeah,
What does it look like 5, 10 years from now?
yeah. There's just like you said, there's just been so much change. I remember I was working. This was before I worked at GE. I worked for GE, and they were doing their real estate division owned a storage facility, self-storage facility, and they were selling it to a competitor. So they were divesting of that thing, and so we were doing all the communications for that. Well, the acquiring company had more sophisticated communications channels than we did at the storage facility that GE had. All they had in that facility, they didn't even have email. Even for the person that runs the place, they didn't have email. They had a fax machine.
Hmm.
That's it. That's all they had. All these locations, hundreds of locations across the U.S. They just had fax machines. And so today, when I'm in a call with somebody who's like, "Oh, our app's not working right. Our employees aren't on it. You know, we have the latest gizmo thing, and we're still not getting through to people." And I'm like, "Yeah, because it has nothing to do with the channel. It's because content's wrong." So on that fax machine at 12 o'clock on Wednesday, we would fax out, "Here's where things are as part of this process." And people
Mm-hmm.
were gathered around the fax machine waiting for that to come in and fall to the floor so they could pick it up and read it. So it doesn't matter what the channel is. We can make progress since then, and 20 years from now, there'll be, other things. But
Yeah.
what's most important is the content. They gathered around there not because the fax machine is cool, but because of what was coming through there.
Yeah.
Same thing with anything else going forward. It is about the information. It is about the content. It's about the story that you're trying to tell and the story you want them to tell back of what's going on. And to me, that's the future. It's going to be a bunch of AI. There's going to be a bunch of digital tools, and a huge push by the world for things to feel less human, and that is an opportunity for things to feel more human.
Yeah.
It's just like right now, everything's digital. You get emails and websites and all this other stuff. But if your senior leader sent you a note card in the mail with a stamp on an envelope that they hand wrote, you're going to open that thing and it is going to break through the clutter because it is not what you are used to. And in the
Yep.
future, when all we're used to is digital, analog and human is going to be even more critical.
Wow. That's another mic drop moment. So I'm going to ask you my last question here, Jason, because I don't know where we can go up from here.
That's so flattering. Thank you.
What haven't I asked you, Jason, that you'd like to share with the audience?
Oh gosh. I think I like to say this a lot, and people think I'm a heretic, and that's fine. I have my own podcast, Storycast. I say what I want to. I'm used to it. So here goes my heretic thing. We wouldn't have a need for internal communications if leaders were leading. And then the internal communications people get mad at me. What do you mean? Our jobs? This is our job. Yeah. We really wouldn't have a job, if the leaders were leading. And then the leaders get mad. What do you think I'm doing? I'm leading my butt off every single day. All right. What can we do to help you be not just a better leader? You're already a pretty good one, or you wouldn't be in that job probably. What can we do to help you be a better one? And 9 times out of 10, that is how to be a better communicator. Not just what you say, but how you listen and respond. There's 2 pieces to communication, and people on the company side are always used to one piece. We're sending this out. Great, send stuff out, but also receive stuff back. And the better you are at that, the more likely it is that you'll embrace your role as a communicator as part of your job as a leader. And so many organizations, large or small, the leaders have been trained to say, well, I don't need to do that. I've got those folks over there in corporate communications. They do all that for us, right? I don't have to do any of this stuff. No. Communication is a leadership responsibility. It is not a department down the hall. You are just as responsible for communicating as the communicators. In fact, you're better at it and more believable. And all we do is smoke and mirrors compared to the magic that you can do. So here's how you can do it better. We're not going to do it for you because that's what it'll look like we did. We want you to be better at it and do it your way. Sound like you, talk like you, be like you. We'll help you be better at that. And the better you are at that, the better leader you're going to be and the better results you're going to get. And the more your employees are going to enjoy working there.
Well, I was fucking wrong, Jason, because that was a mic drop moment. Holy shit. I'm very rarely speechless on my own show, and I rarely am the only one who cusses on my own show, but you just blew my mind, Jason. That was amazingly powerful, and I loved it. That was amazing.
Well, thank you. I mean, it took me 35 years to be able to say something like that. So that is a hard one, paragraph to spit out. But that's why, it's important to spit it out because me and you and others like us, we have those kinds of stories in our head that will make a difference to companies and more importantly, to the people that work there. So this podcast and everything that you do and stuff that these listeners are doing to make things better, all that stuff matters. And so the more we can talk about it and better we can get at it, the better we'll all be. So I'm glad to say it. I'm glad it took me 35 years to be able to say it, but I'm glad I can say it now.
I'm thankful you said it on this show. And Jason, thank you for being a part of this show.
Oh gosh, what a thrill. Thank you. I'm just so humbled to be on here. I really appreciate it.
And just as a teaser for everybody listening, Jason is going to be on the other show, and he's going to talk through some solutions on how to communicate better. I'm very thankful for you being on today. Looking forward to our next opportunity to record together and what that will look like.
Me too. We can cover a lot of communications tactics. I think a lot of people think, oh, well, it all has to be a Cadillac. A Chevrolet will get your ass there. So let's talk about some Chevrolets that are really effective that won't bust your budget.
I love it. Jason, thank you again.
Thank you,
folks.
Jim.
That's a wrap on today's episode of the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. What an amazing conversation with Jason Anthoine. He's a pioneer in transforming workplace culture, but he gave us 3-4 mic drop moments in one 45-minute episode. So that's amazing. From his days leading communications for global giants to founding innovative employee engagement firms and launching groundbreaking initiatives like Connect and Riding Shotgun, Jason's journey is a testament to the power of courage, clarity, and asking that super important question of what if? If you found value in today's conversation, don't keep it to yourself. Communicate it. Share it with your friends, your colleagues, your grandma, anyone else who's interested and passionate about creating a better workplace. And while you're at it, please take a moment to rate and review the show. Your feedback helps us reach more people and continue bringing you these powerful stories. And on top of it, it rockets us up the charts, which means more people find us, which means I'm able to do this more often because I don't make any money from it. So rate and review the show so I can continue to do this. Remember, folks, you can find all of our episodes and more at the manufacturingculturepodcast.com webpage. That's themfgconnector.com. Don't forget to connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok for the latest updates and some behind the scenes content. And if you're hungry for even more solutions in the manufacturing world, head over to YouTube and check out the Manufacturing Connector, that show that Jason will be on here shortly. Folks, thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time on the Manufacturing Culture Podcast, where we deep dive into the stories that shape our industry and the people who make it all happen. Until then, keep pushing boundaries and making a difference in this industry. Have a great weekend.